This house on Maplewood Avenue was once my sanctuary. I can still remember the day the realtor handed me the keys, and I walked in as a full-fledged owner for the first time. Duncan was only 13 then, and he looked at me with such admiration as if I'd accomplished the impossible. "Is this really our house, Mom?" he asked, running his palm along the wooden railing of the stairs. "Yes, sweetie, it's our house now," I replied, feeling a swell of pride. I didn't know then that 38 years later, that son would kick me out of the house like a piece of junk. My name is Lillian Trent. I'm 76 years old, and I've worked most of my life as a merchandiser for a large department store in Birmingham. Not the most prestigious profession, but it taught me two things: quality and money, especially money. After Harold, my husband, ran away with his secretary from his office, leaving me with a baby and a mortgage, I swore to myself that I would never depend on anyone again. I put a little away each month, then I started investing. Small amounts at first, then more. I studied the market, read financial magazines, attended free seminars. By 45, I had paid off my mortgage. By 50, I had saved a decent amount, and by 60, I could not work, but I continued to do so for the sake of socializing and not to sit at home. No one knew about my savings, not my friends, not my coworkers, not even Duncan, especially Duncan. After everything I'd been through with his father, I'd decided that finances were something that should remain my business alone. The house on Maplewood Avenue was my fortress. 2 floors, 4 bedrooms, a small garden, nothing luxurious but spacious enough to feel comfortable. I loved working in the garden, growing roses and dahlias that won prizes at local shows. On weekends, I had tea parties with my neighbors. Duncan grew up, graduated from college, got a job at an insurance company. Life was smooth and quiet. And then he met Priscilla. Priscilla Norfolk, with her perfect manicure and perpetual smile that never reached her eyes. She worked for the same insurance company as Duncan, doing some kind of sales. They dated for 6 months, then got engaged, then married 3 months later. Small ceremony, cheap restaurant, honeymoon in Cornwall, just like people. Mom, Priscilla and I were thinking. Duncan started one Sunday lunchtime when the newlyweds came to visit me. That was 5 years ago. "You're here all alone in this big house, and we're paying crazy money for a rented apartment. We could move in with you," Priscilla said, putting her manicured hand in mine. "You wouldn't have to do everything yourself, and we could save for our own place." I sensed a catch, but I couldn't say no to my son. After all, the house is really big, and socializing with young people keeps you energized. "Only temporarily, until you save up for your own house," I agreed then. They moved in 2 weeks later. Everything was fine for the first time. Duncan fixed everything he couldn't get his hands on. Priscilla sometimes cooked dinner when I was working late. We watched TV together in the evenings. It was almost idyllic. The change began gradually, so subtly that I didn't immediately realize what was happening. First, Priscilla rearranged the living room furniture, explaining that it was more modern. Then my photographs began to disappear from the shelves and walls, giving way to her collection of porcelain figurines. Then my favorite dahlias in the backyard were uprooted to make way for trendy landscaping. "Mom, no offense, but those flowers look like Grandma's from the country," Duncan said, not even noticing how pale that statement made me. As time passed, I found myself feeling more and more like a guest in my own home. Duncan and Priscilla occupied the entire second floor, including my former bedroom. I'd been asked to move into the small room on the first floor that we'd used as a study. "It's hard for you to climb stairs, Mom," Duncan said with fake concern in his voice. "This way you don't have to exert yourself." I didn't argue. After all, it really was more comfortable. Although my knees were perfectly fine despite my age. Then came the unspoken rules. No turning on the TV too loud, no using the washing machine after 8 p.m., no warning if I was going to invite my girlfriends over. My house was no longer mine. One day I came home from the store and found Priscilla rummaging through my dresser. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to contain my indignation. "Oh, Lillian!" She didn't even blush. "I was just looking through some old photo albums. I wanted to show my mom what Duncan was like when he was a kid." I knew she was lying. The photo albums were in the living room closet, and she knew it all too well. But I remained silent, only shutting the door to the room tighter when she came out. From that day on, I started locking the door when I left the house. Priscilla noticed this and did not fail to inform Duncan. Mom, don't you trust us? He asked her with resentment in his voice that evening. I just like my privacy, I replied as I continued knitting. I purposely kept my eyes closed, afraid my son would see the bitterness in them. It's weird, Mom. We're a family. We're not supposed to have secrets from each other. I almost laughed in his face at that moment. If only he knew what a secret I'd been keeping from him all these years. A secret hidden in safe deposit boxes and investment portfolios. Months went by and my space in the house shrank like shagreen skin. My books moved from the living room to boxes in the garage to make room for modern literature. My favorite china, which I had collected over the years, was put away in a distant closet. It's too old-fashioned and doesn't match the new decor. Even my old Vauxhall in the driveway was frowned upon. Mom, it's ruining the whole look, Duncan said one day. Why don't you sell it already? You hardly ever drive it anyway. I drive it for shopping and to the doctor's office, I argued. You could call a cab or ask me to drive you, he said, as if he were doing me a favor. I just shook my head. My car was my last island of independence. At dinner, I found myself more and more in the role of silent observer. Duncan and Priscilla discussed their work, their weekend plans, their new purchases. It was as if I didn't exist. Lillian, pass the salt, Priscilla said, never calling me mother or even Mrs. Trent. When it was my birthday, 75 years old, an anniversary after all, Duncan and Priscilla had gone to her parents' house for the weekend, leaving a card and a box of chocolates on the table. Sorry, Mom. Long time promise to come visit them. We'll celebrate when we get back. We never celebrated. I remember sitting alone in my little room that night, looking at the card with the trivial greeting, and thinking about how far we had drifted apart. Duncan, my little boy who once couldn't sleep without my lullaby, was now a stranger looking through me. My friend Eleanor, the only one who remembered to congratulate me personally, said then, Lil, why do you put up with this? This is your house. He's my son, I replied, as if that explained everything. A son who treats you like a piece of furniture that you can't bear to throw away, she snorted. I remained silent, but her words sank into my soul. The final turning point happened last spring. I was sitting in the garden enjoying a rare sunny day when I heard Duncan and Priscilla talking through the open kitchen window. They didn't know I could hear them. How much longer do you think she'll last? Priscilla's voice was casual, like she was asking about the weather. Don't say that, Duncan urged her, but somehow unconvincingly. I'm just being practical, darling. Your mother isn't getting any younger. And the house is fully paid off, and when she dies, it will pass to you. We could sell it and buy something closer to the center. Prissy, stop it! Duncan sounded annoyed but not indignant. Or we could suggest she move into a nursing home. It's not like she can live alone forever. It's not safe at her age. I froze, feeling the blood drain from my face. They were discussing my future, my life, as if I were a burden to be rid of. Maybe you're right, Duncan said after a pause. I'll talk to her next week. The week after I'd overheard the conversation dragged on for an agonizingly long time. I tried to act normal, but I was seething with resentment and bitterness. Duncan walked around me guiltily, occasionally glancing at me thoughtfully, as if he were assessing how old and infirm I was. Priscilla, on the other hand, made no secret of her intentions. She started bringing in brochures about nursing homes, supposedly leaving them by accident on the coffee table in the living room. You know, Lillian, she said at dinner one night, my Aunt Martha just moved into Sunset Gardens. She says it's wonderful. 24-hour care, peer community, recreational programs. Really? I tried to keep my voice light. How old is she? 83, Priscilla replied with a slight hesitation. 7 years older than me, I said calmly. And I suppose she has some health problems? Well, arthritis, some dementia. How interesting, I sipped my tea. I have neither. My last physical showed that I'm in great shape for my age. Duncan coughed awkwardly, not lifting his eyes from his plate. Mom, no one's saying you need to go to a nursing home right now. We're just thinking about the future. My future or your future? I asked straight out. There was a heavy silence. Priscilla pressed her lips into a thin line, and Duncan finally looked at me with annoyance. "We're worried about you." His voice sounded clipped, as if he'd rehearsed the phrase. "This house is too big for you alone." "But I'm not alone," I objected. "You've lived here for 5 years." "Yes, but—" He hesitated. "We can't take care of you forever." It was so ridiculous, I almost laughed. What kind of care were we talking about? The way they'd slowly pushed me out of my rooms? About how they never once inquired about my day? About how they forgot my anniversary? "I take excellent care of myself, Duncan," I said firmly. "I always have. You too, by the way." "Lillian," Priscilla intervened with a sweet smile, "no one is minimizing your merits, but you have to face the truth. Your health isn't getting any better." "My health is perfectly fine," I retorted. "And maintaining a house this big takes energy and money," she continued as if I hadn't said anything. "The roof needs repair, the garden is neglected, the heating bills are rising." "And whose fault is that?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Who uprooted my flowers? Who insisted on installing a new heating system when the old one was working fine?" Priscilla turned pale with anger. "We just wanted to make the house more modern and comfortable." "For ourselves," I added quietly. "Not for me." Duncan jumped up, slamming his chair down. "Stop it, Mother. This is unbearable. We're trying to help, and you're acting like a whimsical child." His words hurt more than a slap. My son, my flesh and blood, the man I sacrificed everything for, standing there yelling at me, defending a woman who wanted to throw me out of my own home. "I'm tired of you picking on Priscilla," he continued, growing more and more agitated. "She does her best to make you feel good, and all you do is criticize and complain." I silently got up from the table and went to my room. That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time, going over in my mind all the years that I spent on raising my son. Where had I made a mistake? When had my caring boy turned into this selfish man ready to kick his own mother out the door? In the morning, when I came down to breakfast, I found only Priscilla in the kitchen. She pretended to be very busy making coffee, but I could sense that she was waiting for me. "Where's Duncan?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of tea. "He went to work early," she said, not looking at me. "Lillian, we need to talk." I sat down at the table, inwardly preparing myself for an unpleasant conversation. "I know it's hard for you to accept the idea of moving," Priscilla began in that tone one uses with sick children. "But it's really the best decision for everyone." "For everyone, or for you and Duncan?" I asked bluntly. She lost her composure for a moment, her eyes glittering with anger, but she pulled herself together quickly. "Lillian, let's be honest. You're 76 years old. You can't live alone. And Duncan and I want to start a life of our own, without—" She hesitated for a word. "No responsibilities." "No burdens, you mean?" I sipped my tea, trying not to show how much it hurt to hear it. "I didn't say that," Priscilla countered, but her eyes showed her true thoughts. "But I thought about it." I put the cup back on the saucer. "Priscilla, let's really be honest. You've never hidden the fact that you don't like me. But I own this house. I bought it. I paid the mortgage. I've maintained it all these years." "And now you can't maintain it," she retorted. "Your pension barely covers the utilities. Duncan told me about your financial difficulties." I almost laughed in her face. Duncan had no idea of my financial situation. He just assumed that since I worked as a merchandiser, I was living on a modest pension. "My finances are my business," I said calmly. "And I'm perfectly capable of maintaining my home." "But you're not!" Priscilla exclaimed, losing patience. "Look at the garden, the leaky roof, the outdated plumbing." "The garden was in perfect condition until you decided to modernize it," I reminded her. "As for the roof and the plumbing, yes, they need fixing. But instead of helping with that, you're suggesting I move out." "Because repairs cost money you don't have." She raised her voice. "Duncan can't pull both you and the house on his back." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Let me get this straight, Priscilla. This house belongs to me. Not Duncan's, not yours. Mine. And it's up to me to decide what to do with it." Her face contorted with anger. "You selfish old woman. Duncan is your only son, your heir. This house will be his someday anyway." "Maybe," I agreed. But that someday had not yet come. That was the end of our conversation. Priscilla flew out of the kitchen, slamming the door loudly. I remained seated, staring out the window at the garden that had once been my pride. Now it looked as alien as the rest of the house. That same evening, a crucial conversation took place. Duncan had come home from work earlier than usual, and I could tell by the grim look on his face that Priscilla had already told him everything in her interpretation, of course. "Mom, we need to have a serious talk," he said, coming into the living room where I was reading a book. "Of course, darling." I put the book down and leaned back in my chair. He sat across from me, hands clasped in his lap. Priscilla nestled next to him like a kite, putting her hand on his shoulder in a gesture of support. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot, and I've decided we need to make a change," Duncan began. "You can't live alone in a house this big." "I'm not alone," I objected. "You live with me." "Yes, but it's a temporary solution. Priscilla and I want our own family, our own space, and you need constant care." "Care?" I raised my eyebrows. "Since when do I need care? I'm completely self-sufficient, sane, and sane." "Don't play dumb, Mom," Duncan said irritably. "You forget to turn off the gas, mix up the days of the week. Sometimes you don't remember where you put things." I stared at him in bewilderment. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. Where did he get these symptoms from? "It's not true, Duncan," I said firmly. "I've never forgotten to turn off the gas, and I'm very good with time." "You see," Priscilla exclaimed, "she doesn't even remember. These are typical signs of the early stages of dementia." I turned to her, feeling my anger boiling up inside me. "Priscilla, I know you're anxious to get rid of me, but making up symptoms that don't exist is beneath even you." "Mom!" Duncan jumped to his feet. "How can you say that? Priscilla does nothing but take care of you." "Isn't she?" I stood up too, looking him straight in the eye. "Name one instance where she's actually shown concern for me instead of her own interests." Duncan opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. He looked helplessly back at his wife, who immediately came to his aid. "I always cook for everyone, clean the house, do your laundry," she listed with righteous indignation. "You cook what you and Duncan like, ignoring my preferences," I parried. "You put away my stuff in boxes in the garage. And yes, you're washing my clothes, after I asked you not to touch my stuff because you've already ruined two of my favorite sweaters." Priscilla turned purple with anger, and Duncan grabbed his head. "Stop it!" he shouted. "I can't listen to any more of this bickering. Mom, you have to understand Priscilla and I can't live like this anymore. We need our own home, our own space." "I never stopped you from finding your own home," I said calmly. 5 years ago, you said you were moving in with me temporarily to save up for a place of your own. What happened to that plan?" Duncan and Priscilla exchanged quick glances. "Real estate prices have gone up," Duncan muttered. "We can't afford anything suitable." "And this house suits you," I said. "Yes," Priscilla burst out. "It's perfect for us. It's the right neighborhood, spacious enough, fully paid off." "Exactly," I nodded. "You don't want your own house. You want my house, without me." There was a heavy silence. Duncan stared at the floor. Priscilla clenched her fists. I waited to see what they would say, already knowing the answer. "Mom," Duncan finally said, still not looking me in the eye, "I'm your only child and your heir. This house will be mine someday anyway. Why not now? You could move into a nice nursing home. We could visit you. Or you could get a smaller apartment," Priscilla put in, seeing the look on my face at the mention of a nursing home. "Something more suitable for a lonely older woman." I looked at them both and didn't recognize my son. Where had the boy who cried when I was sick gone? Who brought me flowers on Mother's Day? Who swore he would always take care of me like I took care of him? "I get it," I said quietly. "You want me to leave my own home." "Mom, don't be so dramatic," Duncan grumbled. "We're offering a reasonable solution to the problem. You don't need a house this big, and we need it to start a family." "What family, Duncan?" I looked at him bitterly. "A family isn't just a husband and wife. It's also parents, grandparents. Or do you no longer consider me part of your family?" He averted his eyes, and that gesture told me more than any words could. "Okay," I straightened, feeling a strange calmness fill me. "I'll leave." "You will?" Priscilla couldn't hide her joyful surprise. "Yes," I nodded. "But on one condition. The house stays mine." "What?" they exclaimed in unison. You want me to leave? Please. But the house is not for sale or rewrite. It remains my property until I die. But, then what's the point? Priscilla was confused. We can't invest in renovating a house that doesn't belong to us. Why should we? I shrugged. Live as you are, or move out and rent something more suitable. Mom, that's not fair, Duncan said. We've been taking care of you all these years. I laughed out loud. Taking care of you? What are you talking about, Duncan? When was the last time you asked how I was feeling? When did you ask about my business, my friends, my interests? You've pushed me to the periphery of my own home and now you want to kick me out altogether and you talk about caring? Duncan turned pale but quickly pulled himself together. If you put it that way, we have no choice, he said coldly. Either you sign the house over to me and move out, or… He stopped talking. He stopped talking. Or what? I raised my eyebrows. Throw your own mother out on the street? Not out on the street, Priscilla interjected. To a nursing home, where you belong. I gave her a long look, then turned my gaze to my son. Is that your last word, Duncan? He held my gaze, but in his eyes I could see the shame carefully hidden behind a mask of determination. Yes, Mother. It's the best decision for everyone. All right, I nodded. Give me a week to pack, I'll move out. But where will you go? Duncan asked, worried for the first time. That's not your concern anymore, I replied, turning to leave. And yes, I'm not rewriting the house. You can live here until I decide to sell it. Sell it? Priscilla squeaked. But you can't. I can. I stopped in the doorway. It's mine, and it will stay mine. The next week passed in tense silence. Duncan and Priscilla obviously didn't believe I was really moving out, and they were waiting for me to change my mind. But I methodically packed my things, packing books and photos, selecting what I wanted to take with me. I accomplished a lot in that week. I met with my lawyer and updated my will, consulted with a financial advisor about new investments. I looked at housing options and chose an elegant apartment in a new development in downtown Birmingham. When the day of departure arrived, I hailed a cab and lowered my suitcases to the front door. Duncan and Priscilla watched me packing with a confused look. Mom, are you seriously going to leave? Duncan asked when the cab was waiting outside the house. Absolutely. I put on my coat and checked my purse. I'll leave the keys on the table in the hallway. But, where are you going? He looked genuinely worried, as if he was only now realizing the reality of what was happening. To my new place, I answered simply. A nursing home? Priscilla gasped. You organized everything so quickly? I gave her the sweetest smile. No, darling, the apartment's at River Plaza. River Plaza. Duncan stared at me stunned. But it's the most expensive apartment complex in the city. How can you allow yourself to do that? I finished for him. Very simple, Duncan. I've always been able to afford a lot more than you thought. What do you mean? He looked confused. I mean that your poor old mother isn't so poor. I buttoned up my coat. In 40 years of work, I've not only paid the mortgage on this house, but I've amassed a decent fortune, which, by the way, I don't intend to share with ungrateful children. Priscilla's face stretched with amazement and Duncan turned pale. But how? You used to work as a merchandiser, just a department store merchandiser. So? I shrugged. I knew how to save money and invest wisely, which is more than I can say for you. Apparently. The cab honked, reminding me of myself. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Mom, wait, Duncan's in my way. Let's talk. If you have money, maybe we could make a deal. A house. A future. I looked at him sadly. Even now he wasn't thinking about me, he was thinking about his own gain. It's too late, Duncan. You've made your choice, I've made mine. The utility bill will come next month. Don't forget to pay it. I walked around him and out to the street where a cab was waiting for me. The driver helped me load my suitcases and I got into the back seat without looking back. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Where are we going, ma'am? The driver asked. River Plaza, I said, looking ahead, and let's stop at the bank on the way. I have an appointment with my financial advisor. The apartment at River Plaza exceeded my expectations. A spacious living room with panoramic windows overlooking the River Severn, a modern kitchen with all the necessary appliances, A bedroom with a walk-in closet and a bathroom more like a spa. Elevator, 24-hour security, concierge service. All amenities I never even dreamed of in my old house. The first few days, I just enjoyed the quiet and freedom. No one made comments about me watching TV too loudly. No one sighed annoyed if I left my cup on the living room table. No one rearranged my things, threw food out of the refrigerator, or occupied the bathroom for an hour. This was my territory, my rules, my life. Eleanor, my longtime friend, came to love my new place. "Lil, this is amazing," she exclaimed as she looked around the living room. "I can't believe you've been able to afford such luxury all this time. And you've been living in that old house with those—" She hesitated, searching for a word. "You can call things by their proper names," I grinned, pouring tea into the china cups I'd managed to get from the house. "With those ungrateful egomaniacs." "Exactly!" Eleanor laughed with relief. "You know, I've always said you should think of yourself. You've given so many years to Duncan, and he—" "Let's not talk about him," I interrupted her gently, not wanting to spoil the mood. "Tell me about your grandchildren. We spent a wonderful evening talking about everything, making plans for the future. Eleanor urged me to take her on a Mediterranean cruise, a dream we'd cherished since we'd worked at the department store." "Why not?" I agreed. Now that I was free of obligations, I could afford to live for myself. "And we should start with something special," Eleanor suggested. "Something you've always wanted to do, but you've always put it off." I wondered, what did I really want? Travel? Yes, of course. New experiences? Absolutely. But there was something else that I'd dreamed of all my life, but thought was a pipe dream. "You know," I said slowly, "I've always wanted a beautiful sports car." Eleanor looked at me in surprise, and then she laughed. "Lillian Trent, you never cease to amaze me. A sports car at 76? "Why not?" I laughed too. "Age is just a number. I have excellent eyesight, a steady hand, and a valid driver's license. And I've always dreamed of something more exciting than my old Vauxhall." "So, what's it all about?" Eleanor winked at me. "If not now, when?" This conversation wouldn't get out of my head. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, Thomas Clayton, with whom I had worked for 15 years. "Mr. Clayton, good morning. I need your advice," I said after an exchange of pleasantries. "I'm thinking of buying a car, a sports car." There was a pause, then he asked cautiously, "Mrs. Trent, are you sure? Such cars are usually very expensive to maintain." "I'm aware of that," I replied calmly. "And I can afford it. The question is, what model would you recommend?" Mr. Clayton, quickly regrouping, began to list the options, pros and cons of different brands. I listened attentively, but the image of the ideal car was already formed in my head. "What about the Porsche?" I asked when he paused. "Porsche?" He sounded surprised. "Well, they're great cars, prestigious, reliable, good residual value, but they're pretty sporty, stiff suspension, low stance." "Exactly what I want," I confirmed. "I want something special, something to symbolize my new life." Mr. Clayton was silent for a moment, then said with a note of respect in his voice, "In that case, I can arrange for you to visit a Porsche car dealership. I have a manager I know who will give you a personalized presentation." "That would be wonderful," I thanked him. "When would that be possible?" "How about tomorrow afternoon?" "Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon?" I agreed, feeling a pleasant excitement welling up inside me. For the first time in a long time, I was doing something that was purely for myself, something that didn't fit the image of the modest older woman that others saw in me. In the evening, I went through my closet. I wanted to look appropriate for my visit to the car dealership. I chose an elegant ivory pantsuit, a silk blouse, and comfortable but stylish shoes on a low heel. I completed the look with a pearl necklace, which I bought for my 60th birthday, and modest but expensive diamond earrings, a gift from my mother. In the morning, I woke up with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. After breakfast, I called Eleanor to share my plans. "Are you sure you've made up your mind?" she asked admiringly. "Lil, you're the most desperate pensioner I know." "I haven't decided anything yet," I laughed. "I'm just going to see what they have to offer. Maybe it won't be for me." "But you're already excited about it," Eleanor said. "I can hear it in your voice. It's like you're 20 years younger." She was right. I felt younger and more energetic. Like I'd shed the heavy weight that had been dragging me down all these years, the weight of obligations, expectations, compromises. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I called a cab and went to the Porsche showroom. It was located in an upscale neighborhood of the city, in a modern glass and metal building. Inside, I was greeted by the manager, a young man named Trevor, who had been alerted by Mr. Clayton. "Mrs. Trent, welcome." He greeted me with a professional smile. "Mr. Clayton tells me you're interested in our cars. Let me show you our models." Trevor was polite and attentive, but I noticed a shadow of doubt in his eyes. He probably didn't often serve older women interested in sports cars. However, he quickly pulled himself together and began a professional presentation. "We have several models that might interest you. Cayenne is our SUV, very comfortable and prestigious. Macan is a compact crossover, a more affordable option. And the sports models?" I interrupted him. "911, for example?" Trevor blinked in surprise but quickly refocused. "Of course, Mrs. Trent. The 911 is our legendary model. A magnificent sports car with a rich history. Let me show you." He led me into the center of the showroom where a sleek silver car with predatory body lines stood. I slowly walked around the car, admiring its perfect forms. It wasn't just a car, it was a work of art. "May I?" I pointed at the door. "Sure." Trevor hurriedly opened the door and I carefully lowered myself into the leather driver's seat. The interior smelled of new leather and luxury. The steering wheel fit perfectly in my hands. The instrument panel with its multitude of dials and buttons looked impressive. I felt like an astronaut in the cockpit of a spaceship. "What do you think?" Trevor asked, leaning toward the door. "Gorgeous," I answered honestly. "But I'd like to see other colors. Do you have anything brighter?" Trevor seemed pleased by my enthusiasm. "Of course! We have a wide palette. We could look through the catalog, or, He looked around. "We have just the 911 in red, guard red, a very striking shade." He walked me over to another car standing a little ways away, and it took my breath away. The bright red sports car shone under the spotlights like a jewel. It was love at first sight. "This is what I've been looking for," I said, not hiding my admiration. Trevor brightened, sensing a potential sale. "Excellent choice, Mrs. Trent. This model just came in. 911 Carrera E's 3 and 8/10 liters, 443 horsepower, acceleration to 100 kilometers per hour in 3 and 9/10 seconds. I nodded, though the technical details didn't tell me much. I was interested in other things. "Can I choose the color of the interior?" "Of course!" Trevor enthusiastically began to show samples of leather and trim. "We have black, gray, brown, beige, and red," I asked, stroking the steering wheel of the showpiece. "To match the color of the body?" Trevor hesitated for a moment. "It's an unusual combination, Mrs. Trent. Usually, with a red body, you choose black or beige interior for contrast." "I want red," I said firmly. "If that's possible, of course." "It's available through the Porsche exclusive customization program," Trevor replied, quickly flipping through the catalog. "Here, take a look. Burgundy leather, red stitching. It's very striking, although a bit extravagant." "Perfect," I smiled. "And how much would a car like this cost with a personalized finish?" Trevor said a sum that would make most people dizzy. I just nodded. "Good. And when can I get it?" The look on Trevor's face was priceless. He obviously didn't expect that the old lady would so easily agree to buy one of the most expensive cars in the showroom. Given the custom trim, in about 3 months, he muttered. "But first we need to place an order, make a deposit." "Of course." I opened my purse and pulled out my checkbook. "What amount of prepayment do you prefer?" Trevor was completely confused. "Usually it's 25% of the cost of the car, but perhaps you'd like to discuss financing terms. We have favorable credit programs." "That won't be necessary." I started to write a check. "I prefer to pay the full price all at once. It's easier for everyone." At that moment, the front door of the car dealership opened and a couple walked in, talking animatedly among themselves. I didn't even turn around, absorbed in writing the check, but I heard a familiar voice. "I'm telling you, It's a great investment. A car like this is not only prestigious, but it doesn't lose value. I froze. It was a voice I'd recognize out of 1,000. Duncan. My son was here. Same car dealership, same time. How ironic. Mrs. Trent? Trevor called out in concern. Is everything all right? Yes, just a second. I slowly turned around and saw them. Duncan and Priscilla were standing at the entrance, talking to another manager. They hadn't noticed me yet. Priscilla was wearing an expensive suit that I knew she had bought at a discount on sale and was now passing off as a designer suit. Duncan was in his usual business suit that he wore to important meetings. I decided not to hide. After all, they were the ones who'd kicked me out of my house. They were the ones who thought I was a worthless old woman who couldn't take care of herself. It was time to show them how wrong they were. Trevor, I said loud enough to get their attention. I'm taking this car, and if I can, I'd like to pick up this showpiece today. I'm willing to pay extra for urgency. My voice echoed through the silent room of the car dealership. Duncan turned his head sharply and our gazes met. His eyes widened in surprise, his jaw dropped. Priscilla, noticing his reaction, turned too and froze when she saw me. Mom? Duncan stepped forward uncertainly. What are you doing here? The same thing you are, I guess, I answered calmly. Picking out an automobile. A car? He asked, shifting his gaze from me to the red Porsche and back again. You're going to buy it? I'm not going to buy it. I smiled and handed the check to a stunned Trevor. Here's the down payment. I'll wire the rest as soon as you have the paperwork ready. Priscilla came closer, her face contorted with a mixture of distrust and anger. Lillian, are you crazy? She hissed. It's a Porsche. It's worth a fortune. I know how much it costs, darling, I said in a flat voice, and I can afford it. But how? Duncan looked completely confused. Where did you get that kind of money? I told you I'm not as poor as you think I am, I shrugged. 40 years of work, reasonable investments. It's amazing how much you can save if you don't spend it all on designer clothes and fancy gadgets. The last sentence was a stiletto to Priscilla, who was always bragging about her purchases, even though her credit cards, I suspected, were loaded with debt. But you worked as a merchandiser, Duncan exclaimed, still in disbelief. Just a department store merchandiser. Yeah, so what? I raised an eyebrow. Carl Benz started out as a mechanic and built Mercedes. John Rockefeller was an accountant before he became an oil magnate. Profession doesn't determine financial success, Duncan. Smart decisions and discipline do. Trevor, who had recovered in time, intervened in the conversation. Mrs. Trent, your check is in order. As for this exhibition piece, unfortunately, it's already been reserved for another customer. Oh, that's a shame. I couldn't hide my disappointment. However, Trevor continued, we have another Carrera ES in stock. It's also red, but with a black interior. If you're happy with that, we can have it ready for you by tomorrow. That would be great, I said brightly. The black interior is good too, and we'll make a personalized order for the future anyway. Wait, Duncan intervened, clearly trying to gather his thoughts. Mom, you can't just buy a Porsche. It's ridiculous. You're 76 years old. So? I looked at him defiantly. At my age, Colonel Sanders was just starting his fast food empire. Michelangelo was working on the Sistine Chapel frescoes. Age is just a number, Duncan. But it's dangerous, he objected. Such a powerful automobile at your age. I have excellent eyesight, steady hands, and a valid driver's license, I cut him off. And unlike some young people, I'm not going to speed or break the rules. Priscilla, finally out of her stupor, tugged on Duncan's sleeve. Honey, let's go. This is crazy. She's obviously out of her mind. No, Priscilla, I'm just being myself for the first time in a long time, I replied calmly. And I do what I want to do, not what others think is appropriate for a woman my age. Trevor, sensing the tension, coughed delicately. Mrs. Trent, if you don't mind, we could go to my office for the paperwork. Of course. I nodded and turned to my son and daughter-in-law. It was nice to see you. I won't keep you any longer. Mom, wait. Duncan grabbed my hand. We can't leave like this. We need to talk. About the house, about money, the future. I released my hand gently but firmly. I thought we'd already talked about everything, Duncan. You've made it clear that I'm a burden to you. Well, Now I'm free of obligation to you, and you're free of obligation to me. Isn't that what you wanted? No, I mean, he stammered, glancing at Priscilla. We just wanted what was best for you. And I want what's best for me, I smiled. A ripe, cherry-colored Porsche with a leather interior. Isn't that beautiful? I turned to Trevor, who was waiting patiently on the sidelines. I'm ready to sign all the necessary documents, and please have the car ready by tomorrow morning. Say, 10 o'clock? Of course, Mrs. Trent. Trevor nodded with a new respect in his eyes. Everything will be ready. I followed him, feeling the stunned looks of Duncan and Priscilla on me. Their faces, frozen in expressions of shock and disbelief, were my best reward for years of humiliation and neglect. The next morning, I returned to the car dealership, where my new car was waiting for me. A bright red Porsche with chrome details, gleaming in the morning sunlight. Trevor gave me a detailed briefing, explained all the functions and features of the car, and then ceremoniously handed me the keys. Mrs. Trent, congratulations on your purchase. He shook my hand. I'm sure you'll enjoy driving it. I'm sure I will, I said, not hiding my excitement. I carefully got behind the wheel, adjusted the seat and mirrors, fastened my seatbelt. I put the key in the ignition and the powerful engine gave a low growl. It was a beautiful sound. The sound of freedom and new possibilities. Slowly driving out of the showroom, I took some time to get used to the controls. The car was sensitive, responsive, like a living being. Gradually, I got used to it and headed towards my new apartment, feeling the surprised looks of passers-by. It's not every day you see an older woman driving a bright red Porsche on the streets of Birmingham. When I parked at the River Plaza, the concierge couldn't hide his amazement. Mrs. Trent, is this, your car? Yes, George, I smiled, handing him the keys. Would you mind putting it in my parking space? It would be my pleasure, ma'am. He accepted the keys with awe. Gorgeous car. Thank you. I nodded and headed for the elevator, feeling light in my body. Once I was in the apartment, I went to the window and looked down where George was carefully parking my new car. The red Porsche stood out among the other cars like an exotic flower among ordinary plants. It was bright, bold, unusual, exactly what I had finally allowed myself to be. In that moment, I realized it was more than just a car. It was a symbol of my liberation from the shackles of convention, from the weight of other people's expectations, from the role of a modest and inconspicuous old lady that had been imposed on me for so long. It was my own choice, my own decision, my way of saying to the world, I am here, I live, and I'm going to do what I want to do. My phone rang as I was making my morning coffee. I glanced at the screen and saw a familiar number. Duncan. A week ago, I would have rushed to the phone, happy that my son remembered me. But now, after everything that had happened, I felt only mild irritation. I let the coffee steep in the French press before picking up the phone. Good morning, Duncan, I said in a steady voice. Mom, finally, this is the third time I've called. He sounded impatient. I've been busy, I replied, pouring coffee into a cup. How could you be busy at 8 in the morning? He snorted, but then he realized it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. How are you? Fine. I walked out onto the balcony with my cup and settled into a wicker chair overlooking the river. To what do I owe the call? There was a pause, and I could literally hear him picking his words. Mom, I wanted to apologize for everything. Priscilla and I talked about a lot of things, and we realized we were wrong. You shouldn't live alone. We're worried about you. I sipped my coffee, savoring its bitter flavor and the view of the morning mist over the water. River Plaza has 24-hour security and concierge service, I said. It's safer than our old neighborhood. But you're all alone in there. He sounded annoyed. No family, no? No people who think I'm a burden? I finished the sentence for him. Yes, Duncan, and you know, it's wonderful. Another pause. I heard him take a deep breath. Mom, let's not fight. I'm calling to invite you to lunch. This Sunday. Nothing fancy, just a family dinner. Priscilla's cooking your favorite roast beef. I almost laughed. In our 5 years together, Priscilla had never once asked me what I liked to eat. And she'd certainly never cooked for me. That's nice of her, I said neutrally. But I'm busy this Sunday. Busy? Busy with what? He sounded genuinely surprised, as if he couldn't imagine that I could have a life of my own. I have plans with Eleanor. We're going to Bala Lake, I answered. It was true. We were really planning a little road trip in my new car. To the lake? In what? In my Porsche, of course. I could almost physically feel him wince on the other end of the line. Mom, you can't be serious. You can't drive that car. It's too powerful, too dangerous for… For who, Duncan? An old lady like me? I tried to keep my voice calm, but I was seething inside. I'm perfectly capable of driving, and I enjoy it immensely. But this is irresponsible. What if there's an accident? What if… Then my lawyer will contact you, I interrupted him. All the necessary documents are in order. Paperwork? What paperwork? His voice shook. Will, powers of attorney, incapacity orders, I said in a casual tone, as if I were discussing a shopping list. Everything is legally perfect. Mom, you're scaring me, he said after a long pause. What's going on? This isn't like you. On the contrary, Duncan. For the first time in years, I'm acting like the real me instead of the conveniently convenient Lillian's mom. Look, let's meet up and talk, not over the phone. I can come over to your place after work today. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, but another part of me realized that this conversation was inevitable. Maybe it would be better to have it on my turf, where I felt confident. Okay, I agreed. Be there at 6. You know the address. Thanks, Mom. I could hear the relief in his voice. I'll see you tonight. I hung up the phone and sat looking at the river for a while. What did Duncan really want? Was he suddenly feeling guilty? Or did he just realize that he had missed out on a possible gain, and now he was trying to make things right? The day went by quickly. I went shopping, looked in a bookstore, had lunch with Eleanor in a cozy cafe nearby. When I told her about Duncan's impending visit, she frowned. Be careful, Lil. Something tells me he didn't just decide to make up for nothing. I know, I sighed. But sooner or later, we're going to have to talk. Better to do it now, on my terms. By 6 o'clock, I had changed into a simple but elegant dress and had tea and cookies ready. Not that I was going to have a cozy get-together, but old habits are hard to eradicate. At 6 sharp, the intercom buzzed. The concierge said I had visitors. Visitors? I asked again. I was only expecting my son. There's a man and a woman here, ma'am, Mr. and Mrs. Trent. So Duncan brought Priscilla with him, without warning. Typical. Please let them through, I said, suppressing a sigh. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw Duncan and Priscilla, both dressed too formally for a casual visit, as if for a business meeting. Mom! Duncan stepped forward and hugged me awkwardly. It's so good to see you. Hello, Duncan. I pulled away and nodded to his wife. Priscilla, I didn't know you were coming too. I hope you don't mind, she smiled her fake smile. I've been so worried about you. Of course, I stepped back, letting them inside. Come on in. They entered the living room, and I noticed their gazes sliding greedily over the interior, assessing the furniture, the appliances, the view from the window. Priscilla couldn't hold back a sigh of admiration when she saw the panoramic windows overlooking the river. Wow, this is impressive, she murmured. Thank you, I pointed to the couch. Have a seat. Tea, coffee? Tea, please, Duncan replied, taking a seat. Priscilla nodded silently, continuing to look around. I poured the tea into cups, put some cookies on the table, and sat down in the chair across from them. So, I looked at my son. What did you want to talk about? Duncan exchanged a quick glance with Priscilla, then coughed. Mom, we're really worried about you. This whole thing, the moving, the car, it seems like a midlife crisis. I couldn't help but laugh. At 76? Isn't that a little late for a midlife crisis? You know what I mean. He grimaced. Such drastic changes, reckless spending. Rash? I raised an eyebrow. Duncan, I've been planning my finances for 40 years. Believe me, every single thing I've spent has been very well thought out. But a Porsche? At your age? Priscilla intervened. That's crazy! No crazier than kicking your own mother out of her house, I countered calmly. Duncan flinched as if I'd hit him. Mom, we didn't kick you out. We We just offered me a choice between a nursing home and a rented apartment, I finished for him. That's very generous of you. We were looking out for your welfare, Priscilla exclaimed with righteous indignation. You could not live alone in such a large house. And so now I live alone in a spacious apartment with a concierge and security, I smiled. Funny how things turned out, isn't it? Duncan set his cup down and stepped forward. Mom, let's be honest. We made a mistake. We didn't know about your financial situation. If we had known, you wouldn't have kicked me out? I finished it for him. That's interesting. So your attitude toward me depends on my bank account? No, Duncan exclaimed. Of course not. But you must understand, we thought that you were needy, that you were finding it difficult to keep house. And that's why you decided to take it for yourself instead of helping me, I stated. Very thoughtful. Priscilla fidgeted nervously on the couch. Lillian, we all make mistakes, but we're a family. A family has to stick together. It's interesting that you only remembered that now, I said, not when you were planning to put me in a nursing home. I never, she stammered, catching my eye. It was just a suggestion, an option. One that you pushed very hard. I sipped my tea. But let's not beat around the bush. Why are you here? What do you want? Duncan and Priscilla exchanged glances again. Then Duncan sighed and straightened up. Mom, we want to make things right. To get back to a normal relationship. You could come home. If you want to. I almost choked on my tea. Back home. To the house you kicked me out of? Where I was unwelcome within my own walls. It will be different, Priscilla said quickly. We've realized everything. Your room is waiting for you. We can give you your old bedroom back upstairs if you want it. How generous of you, I said dryly. What about my flowers in the garden, my living room furniture, my freedom to have guests and watch TV after 8 o'clock at night? Duncan blushed. Mom, I told you. It's going to be different. We were wrong. We just want you back. I looked at them both carefully. There was genuine remorse written on Duncan's face, but I could see something else behind it. Something calculating. There was no hint of remorse in Priscilla's eyes, just poorly concealed impatience. You know, I said slowly, I don't believe you. What? Duncan looked offended. Mom, how can you? Very simply, I interrupted him. A week ago, you kicked me out of the house, thinking I was a poor old woman to be put in a nursing home. And now that it turns out I'm not poor at all, you're suddenly thinking about family values. It's a strange coincidence, don't you think? You've got it all wrong. Priscilla tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. We're really worried about you. This move, this car. It's not you, Lillian. You've always been so practical. And now I'm impractical? I chuckled. Because I spend my money on myself instead of saving it for you? Priscilla recoiled as if I'd slapped her. Duncan turned pale. Mom, we never counted on your money, he said, but there was no confidence in his voice. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Then why were you so insistent that I sign the house over to you before I left? It's for your own safety, he mumbled. To make it legal. Interesting. I leaned back in my chair. And now you've come to convince me to come back because you're concerned for my safety? Or because you've realized you've missed your chance for a good inheritance? How can you say that? Priscilla exclaimed, but her indignation looked fake. We are your family. Family, I repeated thoughtfully. You know, Priscilla, family isn't just blood ties. It's people who care for each other, who respect each other, who support each other in times of need. I looked at Duncan. When I helped you with your first college tuition, that was family. When I sat by your bedside when you had scarlet fever, that was family. When I turned down a promotion so I wouldn't have to move to another city because you didn't want to change schools, that was family. His gaze dropped to his knees. I continued. And when you uprooted my flowers without asking permission, when you rearranged my living room furniture, claiming mine was too old-fashioned, when you forgot my 75th birthday because you had important plans, that's not family. That's not respect. That's not caring. Mom, we've made mistakes, Duncan said quietly. We recognize that. But can't you give us a second chance? I looked at him for a long moment. My boy, my only son. I once loved him more than my life, and I still do no matter what. But it was a different kind of love, a love without the blind adoration, without the willingness to sacrifice myself for his well-being. Duncan, I said softly, I've given you more than one chance. I've endured 5 years. 5 years of humiliation, neglect, manipulation, and all that time you didn't see me as a human being, only an old mother who is interfering with your happiness. That's not true, he exclaimed, but his eyes avoided my gaze. It is, and you know it, I sighed. I don't hold a grudge against you. I really don't. But I don't want to be a part of a relationship like this anymore. I mean, you're just, cut us out of your life? Priscilla asked incredulously. Your own son? I'm not cutting Duncan out of my life, I replied calmly. I just refuse to be a ball you kick back and forth according to your needs. Today you don't need me. Tomorrow you bring up family values. The day after tomorrow you decide I'm in the way again. There will be no day after tomorrow. Duncan jumped to his feet. Mom, you have to believe us. We've realized everything. When? I asked you bluntly. Before or after you saw me buying the Porsche? He froze with his mouth open, unable to find an answer. Priscilla bit her lip nervously, avoiding my gaze. Their silence was more eloquent than any words. You see? I smiled sadly. I know you're not here for sudden love. You're here for the money, because of the inheritance you think might be slipping out of your hands. Mom, it's not, Duncan started to say, but I raised my hand to stop him. Duncan, please, don't make this any more humiliating for all of us. I know you're my son, and you're legally entitled to a share of the inheritance, and you'll get it, don't worry. But the rest of it, the house, the savings, the investments, it's all mine, and I will dispose of it as I see fit. Priscilla turned pale. What do you mean by part of the inheritance? She asked in a trembling voice. Shouldn't everything go to Duncan as sole heir? I looked at her in slight surprise. Was she really that straightforward? Duncan is legally guaranteed a certain share, I said calmly. The rest I can dispose of as I see fit, and I plan to donate most of it to charity. Charity? Priscilla shrieked. You're giving our money to charity? Not our money, but mine, I corrected her. The money I've earned and increased. And yes, I'd rather help those who really need it than those who see me only as a wallet. Duncan collapsed back onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. Mom, please, he mumbled. Let's not talk about the inheritance. It's gross. I agree, I nodded. So let's close the subject. I'm alive, healthy, and I plan to live many more years enjoying life. And what happens after I die, my will take care of that. Priscilla jumped up, her face contorted with anger. You selfish old woman, she shouted. All this time you've had money, and you've made us live in this old house, saving for everything, saving for your own place. Prissy, shut up, Duncan shouted, but it was too late. I looked calmly at the furious woman who had finally shown her true colors. No one forced you to live with me, Priscilla, I said quietly. It was your decision. And I never hid the fact that I had savings. It's just that no one bothered to ask. You should have helped us. She wouldn't stop. You could have bought us a house, helped us with the mortgage. Instead, you saved up like Scrooge McDuck, and now you're spending it on stupid sports cars and fancy apartments. Priscilla, that's enough. Duncan grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. No, it's not enough. She has to know what we think. All these years you've been pretending to be a poor widow, and you've been— I never pretended to be poor, I interrupted her. I just didn't flaunt my wealth. And by the way, I've helped you more than you realize. With what? Priscilla snorted contemptuously. Who do you think paid the taxes on the house? Insurance? The roof repairs 3 years ago? I raised an eyebrow. You think it was all done on my pension? Duncan froze, blinking in surprise. You paid for all this? He muttered. But why didn't you say anything? Because I didn't want you to feel obligated, I answered simply. I wanted you to live with me because you want to be around me, not out of obligation or money. Priscilla flopped back on the couch, her anger replaced by confusion. I don't understand, she muttered. If you had money, why did you live so modestly? Because I didn't need luxury to be happy, I shrugged. I needed a comfortable home, a garden, a chance to travel sometimes. and I thought I needed a family. But it turned out that what we had wasn't a family. It was, an arranged marriage. Duncan looked up at me with eyes full of pain and shame. Mom, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I smiled softly. Just accept my choice. I've chosen to live for myself, to enjoy what I have while I can. But we could, he hesitated, searching for words. We could start over, like a family, a real family. I shook my head. Duncan, some bridges can't be rebuilt. Too much has been said and done. I don't hold a grudge against you, I really don't. But I'm not going back to my old life. So what now? Priscilla asked hoarsely. You just cut us out of your life? No, I looked at her calmly. Duncan is my son, and he will remain my son no matter what happens. We can see each other, we can talk, but as equals, like adults who respect each other's boundaries. No manipulation, no ulterior motives. And the house? Duncan asked quietly. What will happen to our house? You can live there until you find something more suitable, I answered. I'm not going to put you out on the street like you did me. But the house will remain mine, and I plan to sell it eventually. Sell it? Priscilla shuddered. But where will we live? That's not my concern, I shrugged. You're adults with good salaries. You'll find something you can afford. Duncan rose slowly, his shoulders slumped. I understand, he said quietly. You're right, we don't deserve your forgiveness. This isn't about forgiveness, Duncan. I stood up too. It's about self-respect. I've let others decide my life for too long. It was time for me to take the wheel myself. We stood across from each other, mother and son, so alike on the outside and so different on the inside. I saw in his eyes a mixture of emotions: shame, regret, confusion. But I didn't see any real remorse, only the realization of lost profits. After Duncan and Priscilla's visit, I felt real relief for the first time. It was as if the heavy stone that had been weighing on my chest for years was finally gone. I drank a cup of soothing tea, looking out at the nightlights of Birmingham reflected in the dark water of the River Severn. My new home, my new rules, my new life. The next morning, I woke up feeling like all roads were open before me. For the first time in years, I didn't have to conform to someone else's expectations, to someone else's idea of what a decent older woman should be. I could be myself. Lillian Trent, 76, free and well-to-do. The first thing I did was to set up the apartment. The apartment was spacious and modern, but as impersonal as a hotel room. I wanted to make it truly mine, to fill it with warmth and individuality. I started small. I ordered new curtains in a rich emerald color, which enlivened the living room and beautifully shaded the view of the river. Then I bought some soft cushions with colorful prints and a fluffy rug to add to the coziness. But the main acquisition was a new bookcase. Not that modern minimalist shelving unit that came with the apartment, but a real oak bookcase with carved details and glass doors. I found it at an antique store nearby and fell in love at first sight. Excellent choice, Mrs. Trent, said Harrison, the store owner, a gray-haired gentleman about my age. Victorian, handmade, they don't make them like this anymore. It's beautiful. I ran my hand over the smooth surface. How much for delivery? It's free for you, Harrison smiled. My son will help with the transportation. We'll deliver it tomorrow if that's okay. The next day, the bookcase took its place of honor by the window in the living room. I arranged on the shelves my favorite books, which I had taken from the old house, and added a few new ones, bought in recent days. The closet seemed to transform the whole room, giving it character and depth. Harrison personally came to oversee the installation, and we got to talking over a cup of tea. You have excellent taste, Mrs. Trent, he said, looking around my living room. Most people nowadays prefer this modern, minimalist furniture. White walls, glass tables, no personality. I'm too old for minimalism, I grinned. At my age, you want to surround yourself with things that have character and history. We talked for almost 2 hours. It turned out that we had a lot in common, a love of classical literature, jazz, antiques. Harrison had been a widower for 10 years. His children had long since lived their own lives, and the antique store was not so much a business as a hobby for him. You should check out our book club sometime, he suggested before he left. We meet every Wednesday in a little cafe near the store. Nothing formal, just a few literature lovers discussing what they've read over a cup of tea. I agreed, feeling a pleasant excitement. New acquaintances, new opportunities, all the things I'd been putting off while living under the same roof as Duncan and Priscilla. The following week, I attended a book club and met some amazing people. In addition to Harrison, there was Beatrice, a former literature teacher, sharp-tongued and incredibly erudite. Marcus, a retired history professor with a great sense of humor. Dorothy, a quiet widow who wrote children's books. And Frederick, a former doctor who was into detectives. They were all about my age, with a wealth of life experience and interesting stories. Lillian, what kind of books do you prefer? Asked Beatrice when the first formalities were over. I like the classics, I answered. Austen, Dickens, the Bronte sisters, but lately I've discovered modern authors. Oh, you should read Kazuo Ishiguro, Marcus said. His The Rest of the Day is a masterpiece. And so began my introduction to a new circle of friends. People who valued me for my thoughts and opinions, not for how convenient or inconvenient I was to them. People with whom I could talk about anything in the world without fear of being judged or ridiculed. Gradually, our meetings went beyond the book club. We went to exhibitions at the City Gallery, attended jazz nights at a small club on the outskirts of Birmingham, and had picnics in the park when the weather permitted. One day, I invited everyone over for dinner. It was unusual to cook for company. For the last few years in the old house, the kitchen was practically Priscilla's territory. But I enjoyed remembering old recipes, buying good wine and fresh flowers for the table. What a lovely apartment, Dorothy exclaimed as she entered the living room. And the view is marvelous. Who's this handsome fellow? Frederick stopped at the window, looking out at the parking lot where my bright red Porsche was parked. That's my car, I answered, not hiding my pride. Is it yours? Beatrice went to the window. My God, Lillian, you're full of surprises. At dinner, I told them the story of my car and how Duncan and Priscilla reacted. My new friends laughed until they cried. That's what I mean, to show them. Marcus raised his glass. To Lillian and her red Porsche. To freedom of choice at any age, Harrison added, and everyone enthusiastically supported the toast. This evening was one of the happiest in recent years. Sitting surrounded by new friends made me feel really alive, real. Not Duncan's mom, not elderly Mrs. Trent, but simply Lillian, a woman with her own desires, opinions, and right to happiness. Every day, I came more and more back to the real me. I pulled out an old watercolor I'd abandoned years ago and began to paint again, tentatively at first, afraid I had lost the skill, but gradually my hand remembered the movements and my eye the sense of color. My favorite place to paint was the embankment near my home. I would sit on a bench overlooking the river, take out my sketchbook and paints, and immerse myself in creativity. Sometimes passers-by stopped to watch me work, and their approving comments gave me confidence. When Beatrice heard about my hobby, she suggested I enroll in a watercolor class at the local community center. It's a gathering of enthusiasts like us, she said. No pretensions to professionalism, just a pleasant pastime in good company. I agreed, and soon attended classes twice a week, where I learned new techniques, experimented with color, and received valuable advice from the teacher, a young artist named Zoe. You have a great sense of composition, Lillian, she said, as she looked at my sketch of boats on the river. And you capture the atmosphere perfectly. Have you ever thought of exhibiting your work? Exhibit? I laughed. At my age? What does age have to do with it? Zoe wondered. Moses' grandma started painting at 78 and became a famous artist at 90. Age is no barrier to creativity. Her words made me think. How many opportunities had I missed by thinking I was too old for new endeavors? How much joy had I denied myself because of preconceptions about what was decent at my age? I became bolder in my decisions and desires. I bought myself bright clothes instead of the usual gray and beige outfits. I got a new haircut, more modern and daring. I enrolled in dance classes for the elderly, where I enjoyed learning Latin American rhythms. My friend Eleanor, who visited me almost every week, couldn't get enough of the changes. Lil, you look 20 years younger, she exclaimed, when I showed her my new shoes on a small heel bright blue color. Looking at you makes me feel energized. It's never too late to start living for yourself, I replied, and that phrase became my motto. One evening, while browsing through UK travel guides, I came across an article about a scenic road along the coast of Cornwall. The photos were breathtaking: emerald hills, sheer cliffs, turquoise sea. Suddenly it hit me. Why not take a trip in my Porsche? The idea seemed both crazy and delightful. Me, a 76-year-old woman alone in a sports car, traveling the scenic roads of Cornwall. What will people say? What will they think? And then I laughed, realizing that I don't care at all what others think. All that matters is what I want. The next day, I shared my idea with Harrison during our traditional walk in the park. Cornwall? In a Porsche? He thought for a moment, then smiled broadly. That sounds great. When are you leaving? His enthusiasm was infectious, and I began to plan my route. I decided that I would take a leisurely drive with stops at interesting places without a rigid schedule. I booked cozy hotels and B&Bs in coastal towns, marked on the map the sites I wanted to visit. Eleanor, when she heard about my plans, was apprehensive at first. Lil, are you sure? Alone on a trip like this? What if something happens? What could happen? I shrugged. I have a cell phone, I'm in good physical shape, my car is totally reliable, and I'm not going to be racing down the road at crazy speeds if that's what you're worried about. Still, it's a bit too adventurous. She wouldn't give up. Ellie, I took her hand. Remember how we used to dream about traveling when we were young? How we swore we'd go around the world when we had the money. And then life happened. Marriage, kids, work, worries. We kept putting off and putting off our dreams for later. And here it is. This later. If not now, when? She was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "Take me with you." What? I wasn't sure I heard her right. "Take me with you," she repeated. "There are 2 seats in your Porsche. We can take turns. It's more fun and safer with 2 people." I laughed with joy and hugged her tightly. This was going to be the best trip of our lives. The following weeks were spent in pleasant preparations for the trip. Eleanor and I made lists of things we needed, researched itineraries, and read reviews of the places we planned to visit. I went to the doctor for a checkup to make sure my health was in good shape, and I received full approval. "Mrs. Trent, you're in great shape for your age," Dr. Parker said after reviewing my test results. "Your blood pressure is normal and your heart is working like clockwork. Enjoy your trip." A week before departure, there was an unexpected phone call. Duncan. We hadn't spoken since the night he and Priscilla came to me with peaceful intentions. "Mom? It's me," he sounded unsure. "How are you?" "Hello, Duncan." I was glad to hear my son, despite everything. "I'm fine. And you?" "I'm fine." He was quiet. "Priscilla went to her parents for a couple weeks. We're, a little disagreement." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied sincerely. "Mom, I heard from Eleanor that you're going on a trip in your car," he said after a pause. "Is it true?" "Oh, that's what it is. Eleanor and Duncan talk sometimes, I knew that." "Yes, Eleanor and I are going to Cornwall for 10 days, I confirmed. We'll be sightseeing, enjoying the sea air, sampling the local cuisine." "And you're driving your Porsche?" I could hear the concern in his voice. "Of course I will. Why else would you need a sports car if not for traveling the scenic roads?" "Mom, are you sure it's safe? At my age?" I finished for him with a touch of irony. "Duncan, I've had a physical, I've been cleared by a doctor, and believe me, I'm not going to race. We're going to drive for our own pleasure, stop wherever we want, and take our time." He sighed. "I'm sorry, I'm just worried." "I know," I said softly. "And I appreciate it, but I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "Yeah, I'm starting to realize that," he said, a note of respect in his voice that hadn't been there before. "You've changed, Mom, in a good way." "Thank you, Duncan," I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "How's the search for a new place coming along?" "We're looking at options," he said evasively. After you said you were going to sell the house, we thought it would be best to prepare ahead of time." "That makes sense," I nodded. "I plan to put the house on the market in the fall, so you have time." "I see," he paused. "Mom, I was wondering, would you like to have dinner together before you leave? Just you and me, without Priscilla." I wondered. Part of me was still wary, afraid of being manipulated again. But the other part, The part that would always love my son, no matter what, wanted to give him a chance. Okay, I agreed. Tomorrow night, there's a good Italian restaurant near my house. Great, I could hear the relief in his voice. I'll make a reservation. Dinner with Duncan was surprisingly pleasant. Without Priscilla's pressure, he was more like the boy I'd raised. Attentive, with a good sense of humor, able to listen, not just talk. We recalled funny incidents from his childhood, discussed books, movies, talked a little about his work. He didn't mention the inheritance, didn't try to convince me to come back, didn't criticize my decisions. And at the end of the evening, when we were saying goodbye at the entrance to the restaurant, he suddenly hugged me tightly. I missed you, Mom, he said quietly. The real you. Not the person I tried to make you out to be, but the real you. I hugged him back, feeling warmth spread through my chest. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe we could build a new relationship, not like before, but better, more honest. Have a good trip, he said, pulling away. And be careful on the roads. I will, I promised. And you take care of yourself, Duncan. Finally, the day of departure arrived. Eleanor and I loaded the luggage into the Porsche. It's amazing how much a sports car can hold if you pack smartly. Checked the route on the navigator, and set off. It was an incredible feeling, driving along the M5 highway, listening to jazz songs, chatting with my best friend, stopping whenever I wanted to admire the scenery or grab a bite to eat at a roadside cafe. We reached Cornwall by the following evening, making an overnight stop at a cozy B&B in Gloucestershire. Our first B&B in Padstow turned out to be a charming old building overlooking the harbor. I can't believe we actually did it, Eleanor said as we sat on the terrace with glasses of local cider, admiring the sunset over the sea. So many years of dreaming, planning, and here we are. Better late than never. I raised my glass. Here's to adventure at any age. The next 10 days were filled with experiences. We explored picturesque villages, walked along rocky paths overlooking the ocean, visited ancient castles and gardens, tasted local delicacies in small restaurants. Each evening, tired but happy, we returned to another hotel and shared the day's experiences. My Porsche attracted attention wherever we stayed. People turned around to see two elderly women getting out of a bright red sports car, and their reactions ranged from amazement to admiration. "This car is amazing!" exclaimed the young guy at the gas station. "And you ladies are amazing! Now that's what I call living life to the fullest." Eleanor and I just laughed back. Yes, we were different than the average women our age, and it was wonderful. On the last day before returning home, we stopped on a cliff overlooking the vast Atlantic Ocean. The wind ruffled our hair, the sun warmed our faces, and the waves crashed against the rocks below. "You know, Lil," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "I've always thought that life ends at our age. That all that was left was to live to see the young live life to the fullest. But looking at you, at the way you've changed in the last few months, I realized I was wrong." "Life goes on as long as we breathe," I replied, looking at the horizon. "And it's never too late to start living the way you want to live, not the way other people expect you to live. You're my inspiration." She squeezed my hand. "When we get back, I'm going to do something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I'll take a photography course, maybe even buy a scooter." We laughed as we pictured Eleanor on a brightly colored scooter, camera around her neck, exploring the neighborhoods of Birmingham. "That's the right attitude," I approved. "It's never too late to start a new chapter." A year after I moved out of my old house, life had changed beyond recognition. I sold the house on Maplewood Avenue to a family with 2 young children who I hoped would fill it with laughter and love. Duncan and Priscilla bought a small apartment in the suburbs, not as upscale as they would have liked, but within their means. Our relationship with our son was slowly recovering. We met once a week for lunch, talking about everything, gradually getting to know each other again. Priscilla didn't participate in these meetings, which was fine with me. I knew she still held a grudge, but that was her problem, not mine. My watercolor work, to my great surprise, was exhibited in a small gallery downtown, and a few of them were even bought. It wasn't a lot of money, but the very fact that someone appreciated my art enough to pay for it filled me with pride. The book club grew and now met in a cozy room at the local library. Harrison and I had grown closer, not a romantic relationship, more like a deep friendship between two people who understood each other half-heartedly. Though who knows what the future will bring. Eleanor, true to her word, bought a scooter in the color of the sea wave, and now drove it around the city, to the horror of her children and the delight of her grandchildren. We were planning a new trip, this time to Scotland, along mountain roads and lakes. Life after 75 turned out to be fuller, brighter, and more interesting than I could have imagined. Every morning I woke up with the anticipation of a new day, new discoveries, new joys. I was no longer a shadow, a burden, or a comfortable grandma in the corner. I was Lillian Trent, an artist, a traveler, the owner of a red Porsche, a woman who was finally free to be herself. And looking at my reflection in the mirror, gray hair, wrinkles around my eyes, but a clear, lively look, I told myself every day, the best is yet to come.